Welcome, I'm Bill Brewster and this is Drywall Techniques. This segment is Series 9, turning your paneling walls into smooth wall. Today I'm coming to you from an early 1900s farm home. One of the first things we'll be doing today is to make sure that the paneling itself is secured firmly to the studs. So make sure there's no soft spots, nothing is loose, and making sure all the staples or nails are definitely placed or set deep so nothing's going to come through the finished product. So what we're working with today is 1/2 inch old paneling. So we want to make sure that everything is nice and secure, nothing's going to move on us, and which could cause cracking. Along with prepping the wall, we also need to take out these 1/4 round pieces that are in the corners and these wooden pieces that they have for the outside corners. These need to be removed. Once all your prepping is done, it's time to seal the paneling to make sure no moisture will penetrate the wood and cause it to rise. So at this point, we're going to roll on a good healthy coat of PVA primer or sealer. There are different ways of getting rid of paneling. First way would be to do a full demolition, which would be tearing out the paneling, tearing out your baseboards, your door moldings, window trim. It's a pretty lengthy, messy operation. Second of all would be to do a lamination over the top of the paneling itself. But the homeowners like the idea of having a certain reveal around their baseboards, around their doors. And by putting any kind of lamination across the top of this, you'll end up losing your reveal on your baseboards and your trim. So we're going with fiberglass meshing. It's a pretty innovative new procedure for taking care of paneling as well as other applications. So this is the application we'll be using today. And at this point, we're going to mix up a pan of 45-minute hot mud to start pre-filling the cracks and other areas that need attention. Your hot mud comes in powdered form. You add a little bit of water to it and mix it. In this situation, it'd be better to have it a bit more on the thicker side than the thinner side. This is the consistency that you want your hot mud for pre-fill. When pre-filling the cracks with hot mud, make sure you press the hot mud in firmly. Make sure there's no skips, no cavities. When the hot mud dries, you can scrape off the excess that might slowly kind of ooze out of the crack, and then it'll be ready for the fiberglass tape. At this time the hot mud is dry, so we're ready to scrape back the excess mud. Now we're going to be applying the fiberglass tape. Self-adhesive tape. This tape is very easy to work with. Other than finding the end, especially on a brand new roll. There we go. The easiest way to cut this, being that you want to cut the new end off because of the excess tape and the wrapping that it has, is just take your knife and cut it like that. So being this is self-adhesive tape, you just take it and apply it onto the crack. cracks like this, I like to double up the tape. You do this with all the cracks prior to our mesh job. Now we're ready to mix up a box of all-purpose compound, which we'll be using to install the mesh. This is about the consistency that you want for installing your mesh. The mesh comes in a 38-inch wide roll. It's best to get your dimensions off the wall, roll the mesh out on the floor, and make your cuts at that point. Now we're ready to apply the mud to the paneling before we install the fiberglass sheeting. Apply the coat nice and thin and evenly, all the way out to the corner. Now you're ready to apply the mesh. I'm going to push it up tight next to this trim, next to the lid, and over to this other trim next to the shower. Wipe down evenly. Once the mesh is wiped down, you can see how nicely it conforms to the wall. There's not a lot of buildup, and homeowners will be able to continue having the reveal on their baseboard. Here's a technique you can use when you're working on tall walls or meshing ceilings. Just simply roll it up. Start at one side, Make sure your starting point is nice and even. And just unroll it. When you're wiping down your mesh, make sure you have no wrinkles. Now you're ready to mesh over the top of the fiber tape. You can use your 6-inch knife to help you maneuver the mesh around as you need to. And it's always good to be able to start off in the center, pull the mesh, wipe the mesh this way when you're wiping it down, then pull it the opposite direction. It helps keep the mesh from wrinkling and balling up on you. Now that the mesh is on, we're ready to put on the paper tape and the angles and install the corner bead. This is the consistency of the mud that you want when you're taping or installing corner bead. Make sure you have a thin, even coat of mud in your angle before installing your paper tape. Now when installing the paper tape, make sure you fold it and pre-crease the tape by holding the top and then pulling. Pre-creasing your tape is very important. The last thing you want is to have round corners. You take your tape and insert it into the corner. And when wiping your tape down, make sure you start off in the center. Go up and down. That way you make sure the tape doesn't ball up or wrinkle. this point, make sure there's no wrinkles and there's no heavy or fat edges on either side. And now we're ready to install the corner bead. Before installing your corner bead, make sure there's any loose debris or clumps of mud from the pre-fill are taken off. You want nothing to be protruding up when you install the corner bead, because you want to have a lump underneath the bead at any given point. So you want to keep it as flat and as clean as possible. So when you're mudding the corner, make sure it's a good even coat. No skips. And at this point, you can use all-purpose mud or taping mud. Either one would be just fine. The taping mud has much more plastic in it, which causes it to bond a lot harder than regular all-purpose. Okay, and now we're ready to install the corner bead. We're using Beadex tape-on corner bead. When installing it, make sure you flare the paper first, and then install. And remember, while you're flaring this paper, make sure you don't get a paper cut, because it can happen. Now when installing a corner bead, make sure it goes on square. Hold in the center, press outward, and push down. Make sure it fits nicely across the top towards the base, around the baseboard. As we discussed about the reveal around the baseboards, any kind of overlayment, you would have lost quite a bit of baseboard reveal. You will lose a little bit with this corner bead that goes on, but you definitely need to have a different corner on this edge right here, which gives you a nice, clean, finished edge. So now that we have it adjusted, we're ready to be able to wipe it down. When wiping down your corner bead, start off in the center and work your way up and then work your way down. But put your knife right on the bead. That way you're not running across here on the tape and squeezing all the mud out from underneath it. So just kind of run it up gently. Onto the other side. When wiping down your corner bead, make sure you start up at the center and work your way up and work your way down. When wiping it down, don't run across here on the tape alone, because it'll just wipe out all the tape, all the mud out from underneath the tape. You can press it thusly, run the corner of your knife right on the edge of the bead. That way it'll allow mud to stay underneath the metal and under the tape. It won't cause a blister. Now at this point, for a texture job, 2 coats over the top of the mesh will be sufficient for a texture job or wallpaper. 3 coats would be good enough for smooth wall or paint only. Now let's check our reveals. As you can see, the mesh is tight up against the wall, not taking much space. Even with multiple coats of drywall mud on top of that, it's not going to build it up too terribly much. And as you can see, the corner bead at the bottom, you will lose a little bit of reveal here, but nothing in comparison to what you have had if you had an overlayment of sheetrock. After this coat dries, we'll be ready to put our first coat over the mesh. When coating out your mesh and running corner bead, you want your mud at this consistency. You don't want it too terribly thick, but you want it smooth enough that you can lay it down real easy, wipe it. It's not very easy. Apply pressure. Squeeze the one right on. The corner bead is going to take a lot more fill of material than the mesh will. You don't want to have a lot of start and stops when wiping the mud out. Get as many air bubbles out as you can. On your final pass, one up or one down, one lap mark in the center. You can clean the edge of your corner bead. Then you can start on this side of the wall. Coat this way. When applying your first coat, you're bound to have lap marks. That's why sanding is going to be important, and that'll be the next step prior to the next fill coat. Start in the corner, pull down. Putty coating, you'll be going through quite a bit of material. Basically, at this point, what you're doing is loading up the wall with material. Start up at the top, up to your trim, pull down, long even strokes. You can feel the mud underneath the knife. You can tell if it's wavy or if it's smooth and flat as possible. Like I said, this coat will be getting sanded prior to the next application of mud. This coat will be the heaviest coat that'll be put onto the mesh. Tomorrow's coat will be much thinner. Basically, the next two coats will be a series of skin coats. This is not very hard to do at all. again and clean the corner. And that's your first coat. At this point, our first coat is dry. Now we're ready to sand it out and apply the second coat. There are two different ways of sanding. You can use a hand sponge sander, which is relatively cheap, $3 or $4 at a store, which creates a lot more work for you, or a sanding pole. It allows you to cover a lot more area and less bending over, a lot less back-breaking time sanding. You can use 100 grit sandpaper or 80 grit for sanding down the thicker coats. And while you're sanding, it is also a good idea to wear a dust mask, a particle mask. Sanding black marks out. Try not to burn through the pet. At this point, with the continuing coats, the second coat and the third coat will be basic skim coats, unlike the first coat, which was a heavier fill coat. When coating out your metal, it's always good to use your 12-inch knife to double check to see how much fill or how hollow your metal is. As you can see, this side is going to be not quite a skim coat. It has some fill right along here, this edge that has to be filled. And on the putty coat side, or the mesh side, it's much flatter. So as I said, at this point, this side, the mesh side, will be pretty much just a skim coat at this point. Also, it's good to remember while you're coating out your metal, you don't have a tendency to build this edge up too terribly much. Meaning that you don't want to have some huge blob of mud building up this corner here too much. Something like that. You want nothing like this. You want it nice and tight to that bead, or you'll be fighting it on your finish coat. You want your corners nice and crisp and clean and sharp. As you can tell, the base was not taped because it's a paint grade base. Now if this was a stain grade wood, it would be best to use either the green painter's tape or the blue tape, which has a lot less glue and it's not, there's less chance of it pulling off the lacquer finish of your naturally stained wood. As you can tell, of course, right through here, the reveal, other than this warped baseboard, but our reveal with our metal and our wood is very nice. Turned out very nice there. And this is, you'll be dropping mud, so you might as well get used to it. Make sure you have adequate floor protection. Now you always want to leave a stop instead of a start in your mud, being that it's much easier to sand out a stop mark, which is a lip, a bit of a lip there, than a heavy start, which is an indentation, which basically takes all your mud out. That's really hard to sand out, and if you try to sand it out, it'll make a divot, and it just won't look very even. So always try to leave a nice stopping point like that. And clean your metal. Make sure this edge right here along your trim or whatever other surfaces is clean. Wipe down in between, or even block sand between coats. That way the buildup isn't going to be getting too terribly bad up for you. So at this point we're going to switch over to the other side and coat out the mesh wall. We're going to start off just like we did yesterday in the corner, work our way out towards the corner bead. Don't be alarmed when you're coating this out, seeing a bunch of air bubbles coming out through the mud. Being that the paneling is a sealed surface, the mud can only dry one way. It can only dry outward. When working with new sheetrock, paper absorbs a lot of the moisture as well, so it has a way of dissipating the moisture or absorbing moisture in one direction as well as out to the surface. So over a painted surface, you'll see a lot more bubbles versus a sheetrock wall. And coating over a freshly sanded wall, the mud will have a tendency not want to stick immediately due to the powder that's on the wall. So you may want to dust down the wall in between sandings to get the fine dust off, or just take a couple extra little wipes to get the dust off, and it will be fine. Okay, now we have the wall loaded up. And we're ready to start pulling it off. Nice long even strokes. Make sure your knife doesn't have any nicks in it. Because we're getting closer to the finishing phase, and you don't want to have a lot of scratches to be trying to sand out. If you do have some nicks in your knife, you can try to file them out. As you can see with my coating, as I'm wiping down the wall, I'm applying more pressure on this side of my knife. So as I come down this way, applying more pressure, it alleviates pressure on this side, which the knife on this side does not dig into the mud. So it just kind of like pull it down and pull it down, working your way this way across the wall. Clean your metal. Take a look at it, make sure that you can see the bead. There's no buildup. It's much easier to take care of it now while it's dry, or while it's wet, than trying to deal with it when it's dry and have to do a lot of sanding on it. At this point, you can allow this wall to dry. And then once it's dry, coat this other wall, which will bring this angle in without digging into your fresh mud. So at this point, we'll let this dry, and then we'll put our final coat on tomorrow. At this point, we sped up the process. We sanded the second coat and applied our finish coat. Our finish coat is dry now. We're ready to finish sand it. So at this point, we'll take the sanding sponge and our light and our mask. Always wear a face mask when sanding. Turn on your light and have your sanding sponge. When sanding, shine the light up along the wall to the light will cast a shadow. That way you'll be able to see your imperfections. Lightly sand it. Make sure all your edges are clean, metal's clean. And your wall is ready for paint. Thank you for watching Drywall Techniques, and have a good day.